The Bank of Canada was created, as I said, in 1934. The war started in 1939, and the government then was producing all the money that was needed to build the factories, to build the airplanes, and to build the ships. And as you can see by this graph, and this is from Statistics Canada, the figures, we did not peak high for a national debt. And once the war ended, the soldiers who came back were all put to work. They were either given a university education, free tuition, or they were given a VLA, which is a Veterans Land Act grant, to go into business or start a farming. And this was all money given on behalf of the people to the people.
Yes, folks, the Government of Canada used to spend money in circulation for what it needed to do. Then in 1972, they changed that, started going to private banks for loans with interest attached. And now we are swimming in a debt which we can never ever repay. The end result is that you have your average person struggling to make ends meet. And we have obligations and debts which are not required and not necessary. Now, I read this article right here of this gentleman who tried to use a consumer purchase or a consumer note in order to pay for a mortgage. And one section of this article said consumer bills can only be used to get goods and services for consumption, not for buying land or goods for resale. So the money he borrowed to buy his Orangeville house, now repossessed by the bank, cannot be paid using a bill. So I started doing some investigation, because this was a kind of sentence that made my brain go. And what I found was, sure enough, in the Bills of Exchange Act, in Part 5, an obscured part of the Act, is that we do in fact apparently have the power to purchase consumer goods which are consumed within certain limitations and under certain restrictions, merely by signing the bill that is presented in a certain manner, and in doing so generating a specie of money and spending money into circulation, again for specific things. Let's look at our present money circulation paradigm. The banks claim a monopoly on the creation and insertion of money into the system, so if we want any, we have to go to a bank, borrow, and pay interest on it. We earn money by working for others, even to pay for vitally needed things. All money in circulation has interest attached, which is never created. We have to struggle to pay for food, medical, dental, hydro, with no distinction between consumer goods and other purchases. Shrinking money supply chokes and restricts our ability to engage in trade, and governments need to borrow for infrastructure and maintenance. Now let's look at a potential money circulation paradigm. We'd still go to the bank, borrow, pay interest, and save to start a business or buy land. We could earn money for luxuries by working for others or ourselves. We place money into circulation by way of consumer purchases with no interest attached. We increase a tax base for infrastructure. We no longer have to struggle to pay for food, medical, dental, hydro, and can distinguish between consumer goods and other purchases. A growing money supply balances with our consumption and increases our ability to engage in trade. Governments need not borrow for infrastructure, and people are free to focus on their art, their studies, or develop their passions. And we have less crime, hunger, frustration, anger, homelessness, and unemployment. Now, I do realize this will require a shifting of your perspective. You have to realize who you are. Are you a slave to the corporations or the government? Or are you a child of God? Who owns this country and its wealth? In effect, who serves who? Who is the master? Who is the servant? What follows and what leads? Wealth or trade? The big question, is our ability to trade a function of how much money the bankers allow us? And must all money be put in circulation with interest first paid to the bankers? Basic math says that if you do not put the interest into circulation, you end up owning it all. And it seems they want the whole country for nothing. Now in the Bills of Exchange Act, it says a consumer purchase means a purchase other than a cash purchase of goods or services, or an agreement to purchase goods or services by an individual other than for resale or for use in the course of his business, profession, or calling, and B, from a person who is engaged in the business of selling or providing those goods or services. Only individuals can do this, and only when they are interacting with a person, a legal entity engaged in the business of selling or providing those goods or services. Goods are also defined, and it says goods means any article that is or may be the subject of trade or commerce, but does not include land or any interest therein. It then says that services includes repairs and improvements. However, there is no mention of the repairs and improvements being limited to land or to buildings. It also defines a consumer bill and a consumer note. And a consumer bill is a bill of exchange issued in respect of a consumer purchase and on which the purchaser or any person signing to accommodate the purchaser is liable as a party. A consumer note is a promissory note issued in respect of a consumer purchase and on which the purchaser or anyone signing to accommodate him is liable as a party. Now the question is, who has the power to create these things? According to the Bills of Exchange Act, a consumer bill or note is to be marked. Every consumer bill or consumer note shall be prominently and legibly marked on its face with the words consumer purchase before or at the time when the instrument is signed by the purchaser or by any person signing to accommodate that purchaser. What this means, if you're signing it, if it must be marked before or at the time when the instrument is signed, the one with the pen in their hand has the power to mark that bill or note. I then looked at the Bank of Canada Act and read the preamble, which states, whereas it is desirable to establish a central bank in Canada to regulate credit and currency in the best interests of the economic life of the nation, to control and protect the external value of the national monetary unit, and to mitigate by its influence fluctuations in the general level of production, trade, prices, and employment, so far as may be possible within the scope of monetary action, and generally to promote the economic and financial welfare of Canada. Read that part in yellow again. To mitigate by its influence fluctuations in the general level of production, trade, prices, and employment, so far as they can within the scope of monetary action, and generally to promote the economic and financial welfare of Canada. And what's Canada if not the people of Canada? Also in the Bank of Canada Act, Section 18, we find that they have an obligation to accept deposits of money that are authorized or required by an Act of Parliament to be transferred to the bank, and in accordance with that Act, pay interest on money so deposited, and pay out money to any person entitled to it under that Act, and to carry on any business activity that is incidental to or consequential on something the bank is allowed or required to do by this Act. They have a duty to accept these bills. Now there are limits on what you can use these things for, and this is what is clearly not allowed: land or interest in land, things purchased with cash, gums, chips, smokes, things not subject to being an item of trade, illicit drugs, human beings, gambling, lottery tickets, tools for your trade, calling, or business, work clothes, gas for your work vehicle, computers, TV sets, Xboxes, things you can resell, and things of no value which are not consumed and can be reused or resold. These aren't allowed. Of course, there are things clearly allowed. Food for personal consumption but not for resale. Gasoline, oil, maintenance for your private automobile. Hydro, natural gas, heating oil, and water for your private residence. Repairs and improvements to your house, mind and body, medical and dental services, prescriptions, education fees and cost, toiletries and personal disposable goods. Essentially things which are consumed, are for your own personal use, and are not going to be resold. Now let's look at why it works. Imagine that you have a consumer transaction taking place, a burger and fries. Let's say that someone is selling that for $5. So you have a burger, it has a given value of $5, and then you have a bill worth $5, or a note we'll call it. Now the total value on the table is in fact $10. This is the value available to Canadians for trade. Now what happens after the transaction? The burger is gone, the burp is worth no value, now you have still the $5 on the table. The total value on the table at this point in time is in fact only $5, and there is $5 gone. Now if you add on to that the fact that there are taxes and interest associated with that $5, there has been a change in that which is available to us for the purposes of trade and exchange. And eventually we end up having nothing to trade or use for exchange. And this is what people are suffering through now. Now let's look at what happens when the bill comes. You have that $5 bill or $5 note. They bring you a bill for $5, so that's a negative value. They cancel each other out, so the total value on the table is now $0. This from the original 10. Now, if you complete, it's a complete change in the amount available for exchange. And although we still have $5 on the table, the values cancel each other out. Now let's look at what happens when you use a consumer note for the consumer purchase. You have a burger, it's worth $5. Once it's eaten, it's gone. It's worth negative $5. The bill is, when presented, is negative $5, but a signed bill is the $5. The value available to Canadians for trade does not change because as the need arises, the money is created by the owners of the country to pay for these consumer items. Money is put into circulation at that point of time when the bill is signed because something that cost money and represented money was consumed and is gone, replaced with a satisfied burp and a signature, authorizing and changing a consumer bill into a consumer note, something that only individuals can do. Businesses can't. Now, what supports our right to do this? Remember the Bank of Canada Act, the preamble? They have a duty, according to that preamble, to mitigate by its influence fluctuations in the general level of production, trade, prices, and employment, so far as may be possible within the scope of monetary action. Now, they're not in the business of replacing burgers and fries, but what they can do is take the bill, which has been signed and is now a consumer note, and they can, in fact, accept it as a specie of money because it does, in fact, generally promotes the economic and financial welfare of Canada. Now, I see essentially two sides of the argument. One is philosophical, the other is legal. The philosophical question must be, is it a good thing for Canada to do this? And then the question must be asked, is it legally possible? So I'm going to look at the philosophical one first. What I'm talking about is the power to take a bill upon presentment, mark it, consumer purchase, sign it, give it back to the guy who presented it, and taking that and turning it into a specie of money with that action. The provider then has the power to take this, bring it to their banker, and their banker, or their financial institution, must present it for redemption to the Bank of Canada. And the Bank of Canada has a duty to accept that for either cash or currency or other specie of money. But it's us putting money in circulation through our consumption. Now, let's look at the beneficial aspect of it first. Imagine students not needing to work or study, nor having any difficulty paying for their tuition fees. Imagine artists being free to pursue and focus on their art. Imagine unlimited trade opportunities for entrepreneurs. Imagine an increased tax base for governments, local and municipal, provincial, federal, all of them. Restaurants would be able to accept their checks and feed people who have no money. It would be a huge boon to their business. Doctors and dentists would be able to provide their services and know that they don't have to worry about jumping through insurance schemes or hoops, and they don't have to worry about their patient's ability to pay. They simply can by signing their bill. Banks wouldn't lose out all that much, although they do have a monopoly on the creation of money, and they like that because it allows them to claim the entire country essentially as their own. But there would be more money in circulation, and they make money by playing with that, so I'm sure they wouldn't mind. People wouldn't have to run a rat race just to eat, essentially, is one of the biggest things. And imagine if we were all free to follow and pursue our own dreams and passions, provided doing so didn't harm other people, damage property, or use fraud. And imagine money being put into circulation without any interest attached, and governments being able to pay off the existing debts, with the money created being equal to the things that were consumed. Imagine if our ability to engage in trade and exchange was not a function of how much money the banks have given us, but the amount of money available out there was a function of our trade and our exchanges. The funny thing is, money is not just a tool or a medium of exchange and trade. It could actually be more than that. If it was merely a marker of what trade and exchange had already taken place, then it still has a certain amount of value. Now let's look at the legal argument, which supports our right to take a consumer bill and turn it into a consumer note. First of all, the Bible. We have the dominion, not the money changers, not the temple masters, us. And if we realize the earth is our temple and that they're not in charge of it, the Bible supports our right to do this. The Bill of Rights establishes there's a hierarchy, and it's God, then you, then the government, then the corporations. There is no other way it can logically be. Call God the universe, whatever you want, but it's the only way it can be. Part 5 of the Bills of Exchange Act clearly lays it all out in black and white and gray. It's all right there, and I invite you to do your due diligence and read it. The preamble of the Bank of Canada pretty much establishes our right to do this. The Bank Act of Canada establishes the other banks are acting under a charter of the Bank of Canada, and that establishes their constitution and charter, and they are obliged to accept these as well. And then there's the Financial Administration Act, which establishes that these people who are operating as financial administrators have certain duties, and that means they have to bow to the Bill of Exchange Act and the Bank of Canada Act, and have to recognize our power to use consumer purchase bills and notes in order to engage in our trade and exchange. Now, of course, there are going to be losers. The New World Order are those who want power over us, and we're manipulating the money supply in order to achieve that. They won't like it. Bankers who not only want to make money but want to own everything by monopolizing how money is put into circulation with interest payable to them attached to it. Money hoarders who feel rich and only do so by being able to compare themselves to others who have less and who are hungry. Companies that profit from the desperation of a populace and rely upon workers who otherwise would be following their dreams and passions. Politicians with a hidden agenda to sell us out to foreign powers. Those who benefit from others doing crime, like the criminal justice system. And most importantly, those who have blindly believed in the government and the system and would suffer a severe cognitive dissonance if they were to accept this right. Now we have a choice. We are at a very important time in history, and we have a choice that we can make. And we can have a life of struggle and fight with never enough money in circulation, an inability to follow our passions and our dreams. We could play servants to fictions. Never enough on a dying planet is what it will seem like. We can be absolute slaves to the bankers, allowing them to determine our trade and our exchanges by virtue of how much money they allow us. That's one of our choices. Or we can choose empower mentality, and we can enjoy a life of abundance and sharing. There would always be enough money to meet our basic needs. We can follow our passions and our dreams and our goals. We can be masters over the fictions. And living within our means, save the planet, beat the bankers and their fictions. We could all enjoy this life. We could enjoy it with peace and abundance.
I think I'm going to blow your heads showing you the next part.
Now what I'd like to do is explain a concept I've come up with called the Association of Canadian Consumer Purchasers. It's going to cost $100 to join, and then you'll get a bill for $125 per month after that. You get a card similar in form and function to a debit card, but it will have severe restrictions on what you can use it for. You can only use it for consumable consumer purchases. You'll have a limit of $2,500 a month on it, and you give it to a participating provider just like you would a debit card. They swipe it. We authorize it if it's within the limits, and you sign the bill and create a consumer note using the rights available to you under Canadian law. The $125 a month you send us, we take half of it and put it in trust for you. And then twice a year, you have to decide which of our participating artists you would like to give it to and act as a patron and a sponsor for them. We'll have a website, and the participating artists will put their art up, and you go through it and decide, yeah, I want to give this guy some money so he can buy art supplies or musical instruments or whatever it is. The money you give to them, they will be able to spend on whatever they want, and they won't have the restrictions that this program must have in order to be operating legally within the boundaries expressed with the Bills of Exchange Act. The other half we use for operating costs, for setup, for marketing it to and expanding our base of willing participating providers, the doctors, dentists, restaurateur association, contractors who do home repairs, food providers, perhaps small grocery stores and the like, expanding it so that you can in fact use this card. And we also keep some funds on file for a legal fight if any of the banks or the Bank of Canada or the government wishes to attempt to stop us from exercising these rights. Once we have all of that done, we must save up enough so that we can underwrite the purchases for a certain period of time. We don't have to underwrite them forever. And then once we have a stream of income coming in from the other half, the 2.5% of your purchases that you give to us, we use that to create and support the People's Congress of Canada, a direct participatory democracy type of People's Congress, the establishment and proper organization of the Canadian Common Core of Peace Officers and our own People's Courts. It's well within the law for us to do these things. It's certainly, I think, a good way to use that money. And if people don't like that idea, if it's too soon for that, I would see using it to provide no interest loans to the members for the purchase of land. I think we have an ability here to really create an awesome country where our basic fundamental needs of everyone is met. Nobody has to go hungry. Struggling mothers, retired people, everyone would ensure that their bellies were full, they had clothes on their back, and they had their hydro bills at least covered. And I also think it would be a much needed shot in the arm for the economy, because it would generate a desire on people's part to help serve their fellow man and open up small businesses and operate as legal entities properly registered so that they can access these consumer notes as a specie of money. The way I see it, it's kind of like everyone's dying of thirst. They're all fighting over one well, and if you look behind you over there, you'll see there's a couple more, and not only that, but a bunch of shovels you can dig your own as you need them. We have the right to use the rights expressed in the Bills of Exchange Act to mark a consumer bill, sign it, create a consumer note, and pay for our consumer purchases in this manner. You have rights of which you are unaware. Start using them. Join the Association of Canadian Consumer Purchasers. Exchange $125 cash for $2,500. Would you be willing to exchange $125 cash for $2,500 on a debit card if the $2,500 could only be used for food, hydro bill, gym membership, medical, dental, repairs and improvements on your home, municipal property taxes, personal toiletries, and it came with full emergency coverage? Now what if half of that $125 we got from you every month we held on to you for you in trust, and once or twice a year you got to disperse that money to artists and volunteers of your choice who have joined the program, and we used the remainder for setup and operating cost, and the extra was set aside for no interest loans for members to buy property with. There is of course a catch. You can't buy anything which can be resold, although we will support limited clothing purchases once a year. But the following year, if you need to replace your clothes, you must donate them to charity, and you must purchase from Canadian manufacturers. You cannot use it for your business or profession or calling. It is only available to individuals for their personal consumption. Now people have asked, do you have to be a free man on the land to be a member of the Association of Canadian Consumer Purchasers? The answer is no. It's available to anyone and everyone who is a Canadian, or I'm even looking at making it available to those who are on a visitor's visa. Another question people have had is, do you have to be a member of the association to use this? And again, the answer is no. You right now have the right to use consumer purchases to pay for your consumer goods. But good luck trying to get them to respect that at this point in time. We envision a bit of a legal battle, and that's why we're looking for supporters and members now. The way I look at it, we have a right to do this. I expect there'll be some providers who might wish to claim that they're not obliged to accept these consumer notes. If they want to claim that they have a right to opt out of the Bills of Exchange Act, Part 5, and refuse to accept our consumer notes, then that opens the door for every individual out there to make the exact same claim about every other statute. You'll feed my people now, or I'll tear your house down. Others might wish to argue and claim that we're freeloaders, we're looking for something for nothing. They might try to claim the moral high ground, and I'll tell you what, if you do not like this, simply do not engage in it. I don't like credit cards. That doesn't mean I'm trying to stop you from using them. If you don't like the idea of your fellow Canadians using consumer notes to pay for consumer goods, all you have to do is refuse to do so yourself. That's your remedy. Now I'm sure some will argue, oh, this is too good to be true. But these are people who often do not do their research. Is it too good to be true, you think, the idea that you live in Canada, that this is one of the richest countries on the planet, and that because it's a commonwealth, you are actually one of the owners of that country? The idea, if you think it's too good to be true, I invite you to do a bit of research, read the Bills of Exchange Act, read the Bank Act of Canada, read the Bank Act, read the Financial Administration Act. These rights are ours, they have always been ours, and people simply haven't been exercising them.